So we will move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of Business Motion 15423 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme. And I call on the Minister to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And I now call on Liam Kerr to speak to and move Amendment 15423.2 up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I rise to move the amendment in my name to the Minister's business motion for next week. You see, the Minister has laid a motion suggesting that next Wednesday Parliament debate whether to treat the Prisoners Early Release Scotland Bill as an emergency motion. In other words, this bill, which we haven't actually seen yet, nor will do so until next Tuesday, will not be subject to the usual parliamentary scrutiny. Instead, if members agree, it will be rushed through with less than a week between stages 1 and 3. That will be a big call for MSPs, and I look forward to it, to robust, well-informed and very carefully considered debate. However, the Minister's motion today goes on to list stage 1 of the bill for the following day, less than 24 hours after the vote on whether or not to give it emergency status. Colleagues, just think about what the Minister is saying here. Next Wednesday, we will be asked whether we are prepared to commute a legislative process which was set out in the very founding principles of this Parliament to less than a week. Now, there will be a debate on that for us to decide if that is in the interest of the people of Scotland, of the Parliament, and indeed the prisoners and victims for whom this bill will directly impact. Yet this Minister is so confident that we are all going to ignore that debate and anything that anyone says in it. So certain is he that we will all dutifully press buttons in accordance with instructions, regardless of the debate, that he has peremptorily scheduled the stage 1 debate less than 24 hours later. Because this Minister believes that regardless of how significant the decision to treat this as an emergency bill, you are all just going to do what you are told. How utterly disrespectful. Presiding Officer, I will make arguments next Wednesday against treating this bill as an emergency legislation. One of the arguments I will deploy is that the more we pass bills without scrutiny, without challenge, without the committee input that a unicameral Parliament must surely mandate in all but the most exceptional circumstances, the more we risk legislation by fiat from a minority government, which I submit is exactly what this Minister has inadvertently shown himself to be doing today. Presiding Officer, because I believe in Parliament and its role, I propose an amendment to the business motion. Although I do not believe that this bill should be deemed emergency legislation, I respect the government's prerogative to call that debate. And because I respect my MSP colleagues, I do not presuppose the outcome of that debate. Instead, my amendment proposes that a stage 1 debate on the bill next week be replaced with a debate on Scotland's prisoner population. Because even if MSPs decide that the bill should be treated as an emergency, we would then have had on the Thursday a debate which would help inform MSPs on that bill at a future stage 1. Presiding Officer, Parliament should always be genuinely consulted and never dictated to. The Minister's presupposing of how a debate will go next Wednesday is as disrespectful as it is arrogant. Those who respect Parliament and the job that we as MSPs were sent here to do will vote for my amendment on principle and against the motion if my amendment falls. Those who feel differently will no doubt fall meekly into line and do what they're told.
Thank you. I now call on Martin Whitfield to speak to and move Amendment 15423.1 up to 5 minutes, please.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer, and I move the amendment in my name. The standing orders of this place provide for emergency bills, and the standing orders are very specific about the timetabling of an emergency bill, that it should take place over one day. This has not been provided for in the business motion that has come forward in the Minister's name, but on behalf of the Bureau. And indeed, the only reference is to Stage 1. Therefore, there seems to be an attempt to amend the standing orders with regard to the timetabling of the emergency bill, which again is acceptable and has happened in the past. However, there is no provision to show in the motion where those amendments are likely to take place. And I have a concern with regard to that matter because of, in part, what we heard with regard to the earlier amendment proposal, but also because I feel we are slightly at a loss as about how to deal with this matter, given the way that it's been approached. Because it is right that in October, the Cabinet Secretary made reference to the proposals for an emergency bill and informed the Parliament of her intention to bring a bill to contribute to the sustainable long-term management of prisoners. And she indicated there were two elements in respect of that bill. First, in relation to short-term prisoners of less than 4 years' sentence, where she informed the Parliament that, rightly, with work being done, this could be reduced by some 260 and 390 individuals to create a sustained reduction. The second part of the bill relates to prisoners who have serving sentences in excess of 4 years. And indeed, the reference in relation to this that the Cabinet Secretary gave was that it needs to be in the bill because it's been confirmed after consultation more in-depth consideration was needed with the partners. And indeed, she said that I am prioritising actions that can deliver a sustained reduction to the prison population. Public safety remains paramount, which is why I am focusing on short-term prisoners only and with built-in exceptions. We seem to have a conflation of two bills here. One relating to short-term prisoners, which, on the face of the evidence that's been presented to this Parliament, may indeed make the criteria for being an emergency, but a second part of the bill that relates to long-term prisoners, which clearly does not relate to an emergency situation from the evidence that the Scottish Government have brought. For those reasons, I've moved an amendment to this motion to remove that motion to declare this an emergency bill, which will allow, before that period of time, I hope, agreement within the Bureau in the normal manner on how to deal with this. I'm grateful.
Thank you. And I now call on the Minister to respond on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, President Officer. The Scottish Government is committed to ensuring that for all those who live and work in our prison estate, our prisons can function safely and effectively. The Scottish Prison Service must be able to accommodate those who pose the greatest risk of harm, to protect victims and public safety. They must also be able to support rehabilitation, to reduce reoffending and future victimisation. Let me set out why we are in an urgent situation. In previous statements to Parliament, the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs has set out the scale of the challenge we face. The prison population has often exceeded 8,300 this year. This is an ongoing challenge, the continued safe and effective operation of the estate. It's not just about the numbers, it's also about the complex needs of the population and the persistent pressures on prison staff. As a result of the increasing and complex prison population, the prison estate is under substantial pressure. This reduces the capacity the Scottish Prison Service has to make and prepare individuals for reintegration into the community, to facilitate quality, purposeful activity and carry out rehabilitative work, all of which contributes to a safer Scotland. Visits to prisoners are becoming difficult to maintain, and there are increasing challenges to the effective delivery of healthcare. And of course, I'll give way to Mr Kerr.
Liam Kerr.
The Minister appears to have completely missed the point. Both representations that we've just heard from Martin Whitfield and myself were about the setting of the business for next week, not on whether this should be treated as emergency legislation or not, which is, of course, the debate for next Wednesday.
Minister.
And of course, this is about scheduling the debates to enable us to have that debate. That's what Mr Kerr wants us to not happen. And what I'm doing, which is what was clearly not done by Mr Kerr, is placing this in its wider context. And of course, we are not unique in this position. We know that there are other parts of the UK that face this challenge. The previous UK government released over 10,000 prisoners early between October 2023 and July 2024. The new administration is now releasing many prisoners at 40% rather than 50% of their sentence. Now, we are taking actions, but nonetheless we remain in an urgent situation, and that is why the Cabinet Secretary informed this Parliament on the 10th of October we would be seeking to introduce emergency legislation in November. That's this month, in case anyone's not been paying attention, seeking to change the release point for most short-term prisoners serving sentences of less than 4 years from the current 50% to 40% of their sentence. This was in a very clear parliamentary statement, which she specifically stated she would ask Parliament's permission to progress on an emergency basis. The scheduling of both a timing motion for the bill and a stage 1 debate should not be a surprise to anybody. It did seem to be a surprise to Mr Kerr. At least Mr Whitfield seemed to be paying attention to that regard. I'll happily give way.
Martin Whitfield.
Very grateful, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to the Minister to give way on this point. So does he also agree with the Cabinet Secretary that the emergency element related to short-term prisoners and indeed the long-term prisoners relates to the consultation, which requires further consultation and discussion with stakeholders?
Minister.
Well, of course, there's always going to have to be ongoing consultation with stakeholders as to how we take forward the elements of the bill that we have seek to lay before Parliament. And I think that's what we should get on with debating, because I've laid out the context of the urgency of the situation. It requires an urgent response, and what we want to do is put in place a set of measures, if implemented in early 2025, being able to result in a sustained reduction to the sentence population of around 5%. Now, in relation to... Yes, I'll give way very briefly.
Maggie Chapman.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. Can he just clarify and confirm that if we don't pass this business motion this evening, then we cannot actually proceed with the stage 1 debate next week? And this is about allowing the Scottish Prison Service to get on and undertake the actions it needs to undertake to keep prisoners and victims safe.
Minister.
I absolutely concur with that point. If we do not vote for the business motion today, and let me be clear to Mr Kerr, I make no assumptions about how people will vote, although I have to say it was interesting to suggest he thinks I'm asking people to meekly fall in line. I look forward to seeing a great variance in how the Conservative members vote this evening. Will they meekly fall in line with Mr Kerr's request? But in relation to Ms Chapman's point, yes, if we do not vote for this business motion this evening, then we put in jeopardy our ability to have an urgent response to what is, I think we would all recognise, an urgent situation, a situation which is placing our prison estate under great pressure, which is not good for those who work in that estate. Let's remember those who work in that estate as well as those who are incarcerated there. If the amendments in the name of Liam Kerr and or Martin Whitfield were passed, then that would not allow the Government, or indeed this Parliament, to respond on an urgent basis. This matter is urgent as reflected in the timetable which the Government has developed. The Government's starting point is to maximise parliamentary scrutiny as far as is possible. Mr Whitfield has made the point standing orders ordinarily prescribe an emergency bill be dealt with and disposed of within 1 day. I am not asking Parliament to do that. I'm asking for, yes, an expedited timescale, quicker than it normally would be, but not as constrained as that. And on that basis, I urge Parliament to reject the amendments in the name of Mr Kerr and Mr Whitfield and to vote for the business motion before us.
Thank you. Can I remind members that if the amendment in the name of Liam Kerr is agreed to, the amendment in the name of Martin Whitfield will fall. And the question is that Amendment 15423.2 in the name of Liam Kerr, which seeks to amend Motion 15423 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme, be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is not agreed, therefore we'll move to a vote and there will be a short suspension to allow members to access the digital voting system.